I would invite Audrey Zibelman, Chair of the New York State Department of Public Service, to the stage. Welcome, Audrey. How you doing? And she'll be actually in this dialogue with Steve Proper, who's the Director of Grid Edge for Green Tech Media Research. So take it away, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Cheryl. Hi, everyone. We're in the home stretch. First, before we get started, I just want to acknowledge and thank everyone in the room for all the kind of rich dialogue that we've seen, both in this room as well as over in the exhibition hall and out in the hallways. I think a lot of varying different kind of viewpoints and expertise coming to this conversation, so I think it was a rich discussion, so thanks. Second, I have the pleasure of welcoming Audrey Zibelman with us. And Audrey, there's been a lot of topics covered today that I'm sure the audience would love to get your thoughts and kind of insight on. And I'll start with a topic that was very prevalent in the last conversation, but has been pretty prevalent throughout the day, which is data. Data, customer data, utility analytics, and related to data. What is the power? How do you view the power of data to achieve the goals underneath REV?
Well, it's a great question. A lot of different things are swirling through my head, but you start from the fact that one of the things we're talking about with REV is developing retail markets, and the only way markets work is driving efficiency, and the only ways you drive efficiency is if there's ubiquitous data and it's available to all market participants. One of the things we certainly learned from the wholesale markets was that we had to make sure that the same information was available to all generators, all marketers, all providers, and having that information visible is what drove greater amounts of efficiency throughout the system. So the question is, what do we need to do to replicate that at the retail markets? And there's two things. One is I think the last panelists were talking about system data. Yep. And how do we make that available? So one aspect of REV, what we're going to develop is, we call it, because every time we do something in New York, we have to develop our own acronym. We call it DSIP, which is Distribution System Implementation Plan. And that's really going to be, I believe one of the last speakers was talking about, is really to give everybody the same type of information as to what the distribution utilities are looking at in terms of needs moving forward, where there would be the best locations to put resources, effectively what the value is of resources throughout really their grid both on a planning criteria, so that investors can start thinking about where they might want to put that. And I think that's going to be very critical. One of the things that the Commission has also talked about is, and from pricing, is that we really need to start thinking about taking locational marginal pricing down to the distribution level. Yep. Again, revealing the value is exactly what we're talking about in terms of transactional energy, and people actually seeing that. And then you can start thinking about, do you need to unbundle that even further? That becomes sort of the next stage of intelligence. And then the other data is customer information. So when you think about system information, clearly we have to think about cybersecurity. I'm actually with the other speakers. I don't think it's that big of an issue. We do have people looking at that in REV, but one of the things I think about is that the more information that's available, a lot of things about cybersecurity is being able to identify where there may be problems on the system. So you have multiple sources of information, it actually becomes more secure. But the other piece is, on the consumer side, is what do we need to do to make it very easy for consumers to transact? And what do we do to make it very easy for distribution energy resource providers to find consumers? So we've talked about the developing of a portal, talked about developing an online market. Think about Kayak or Amazon, which I credit with Kate, because she's the first one who mentioned it, and we all got excited about it, is actually thinking about it really easy, just a click transaction, and being able then to solve a lot of the security issues and the data issues and the privacy issues through the way you set up that portal. So it's two pieces of that.
Great. Building on that, I think another big theme really is focus on customers, and in particular customer segmentation. Large commercial customers certainly have different needs than low to medium income customers, but where do you think we're at in terms of customer engagement and customer segmentation, and where do you think we need to be successful?
Well, first of all, for years we've identified customer classes. and large industrial, small commercial. I think that, while it's important for some rate-making processes, where rate allocation has sort of become a tired way of thinking about customers. And particularly at the residential, I think we need to become much more discreet about the types of customers we're talking about. Customers who are more price conscious, customers who are more environmental conscious, different types of younger demographics, customers who want simplicity, all those types of things. And part of what REV is about, and I don't mean to insult anyone in the room, but reason why we're excited that everyone here is that, one, I could tell you, regulators are really, really lousy at marketing. We really don't understand customers. We think of things in very big flavors. There's orange, vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry, and that's about as exciting as we get. Utilities are a little better, but I can tell you guys, you're not that much better. So getting marketers in who really think about customers, who really think about how do you attract customers, how do you get people excited, that's what this is all about. And so I think it would be silly for me to sit here and identify what's going to get a customer engaged. What I need to do is get us out of the way and get the utilities out of the way and give vendors really an opportunity as how to create that pull. I was thinking about this as, people use the cell phone analogy, and it kind of gets, we all use it, about nobody knew you start smartphones. But I've gotten even further. I've got a smartphone. I actually have 2 smartphones. I've got a watch that's smart. I mean, I've just been sucked in entirely, and happily to do it for some reason that I don't know, but they got me excited about buying these gadgets. I think that is not going to come out of a utility. It never was going to come out of AT&T. It's going to take an Apple-type thinking to get people pulled in, and that's why we want to open up the market, as I think Richard talks about, is interoperability. We need to get everyone's minds in the game, and that's what this event is about.
Great. So one of the ways in which REV has started to get at that and look at that innovation and kind of move away from sort of regulatory and utility-led initiatives is through demo projects. So can you shed a bit more light for folks in the room, kind of what is really the importance of these demo projects? How do you view them, and kind of where do you see sort of the demo project process evolving over time?
Sure. So for the first point, let's, we're always very cautious about one fundamental thing. We're talking about electricity. And this is an industry where we have zero tolerance for mistakes. So we cannot do things on a big bang basis and think that we're going to feel comfortable about it. There's a good reason why utilities are conservative and we're conservative about making risks around the system. So one reason we do demos is to give us all an opportunity to look at different technologies and try them out on a smaller scale so we can get comfortable. Secondly, the idea of being able to use third parties, particularly both on the system and behind the meter, and beginning to use these resources as primary resources to help manage reliability and security of the grid is to really develop business models. We talk about it in terms of really the utility as a platform provider. And developing those new business models where utilities start thinking about vendors not just as someone who they pay, and then they pass it on to consumers, but actually as partners, and that they can enable and scale their businesses so they become a new source of revenues, which in the end drive efficiency. We need to develop these business models, and it's a new way of thinking. So it solves, to me, the demos solve a number of different issues we have to deal with. And the other thing, it's very consistent with what we're saying is an entrepreneurial way of thinking about the world. Smart entrepreneurs will tell you that you don't make big bets. You make small bets, and you learn from those bets, and you might pivot onto something else, because that's how you grow a business. And I think once utilities get in the groove, what they want to do and what entrepreneurs want to do is scale these. And I'm sure Cheryl can tell you, and everyone, that's been the problem, is lots of good small ideas, but how do we scale them? And that's, the demos to us are a vehicle to get there. And then the next step for us, I think, is as we move on, we don't think of the demos as just a single bet like we did with the stimulus projects. Let's go out and give a bunch of grants, and hopefully those guys will survive and thrive. What we see it is really a way of doing business, is the utilities learning and beginning to continue to innovate and really start thinking about the demos as a way of conducting business. And of course that, which is something that we're reminded about all the time, requires regulatory change, because we can't expect utilities to spend money and not have a mechanism to recover it. So it's really rethinking how we get things done in the industry. And if you don't do it that way, I think that the fact is everyone's patience gets worn out, and particularly entrepreneurial patience, which we need to pace ourselves against.
So speaking on that a little bit further, both the demo projects that are underway, as well as a lot of the vendors and innovators here in the room, have really thought through, okay, if we're really looking at new business models, then one of the things that we're looking at is really shifting from kind of a cost-based rate recovery model to kind of really placing value on energy and on electricity. So, to the folks in the room, what is your viewpoint in terms of kind of redefining what the value of energy is? How important is that? Topics that were brought up earlier, things like pricing resiliency or, pricing efficiency, or putting a value on that. If you can expand a little bit further on kind of that shift in terms of what the business models could or may look like.
Sure. Well, I think it's two pieces. One is the fact is, as we know, there is a marginal value on electricity, and so being able to calculate out what is that marginal value in an accurate way is important, because then we are making sure we're making the most efficient choices. How deep we need to go is going to be, I think, a matter of discussion and debate as we move forward. But the other thing is I guess, two things. I would be careful in the sense that our utilities are still going to be investing a huge amount of capital. That's capital that I as a regulator want it to be low-cost capital. And so consequently, the idea of moving away from cost basis and value basis is probably not going to happen, because we really do need, there's a big piece of that monopoly business that we want to be cost effective. But by the same token, what we do need to do is start sending price signals out to consumers so that they could start to value things differently, and they can value their behavior. So some of the examples that we've been thinking about could happen is you might have a consumer who's very attracted by the fact if somebody can come in and they could say, look, I can fix your energy price, and I can guarantee you a very green supply of energy. And the customer says, great, I would love that. And so the vendor comes in and says, great, in order to do that, I'm going to give you a smart thermostat, I'm going to give you a retrofit, and I'm going to give you some control devices, which I'll help you manage. And thank goodness that your local utility, whether it's Iberdrola or National Grid or Con Ed, has a program that could value it. So from a customer basis, they may not be doing anything other than they want to do, which is buy simplicity. Right. But from a vendor basis, they're getting the price signal so they can offer that simplicity at a fixed price and help the customer manage those goods. And that's the kind of relationship we want to see. Another set of customers may very well say, hey, I really need to know every day I'm waking up and I'm doing what I can for the environment. So I would like a product that tells me real time what's my carbon footprint. And that's another thing that we would expect to see. So I guess my view is our job as regulators is to provide the price transparency to the providers, and then allow the providers to develop the products that consumers will value, rather than us defining what the market needs to be like. But what we have to do is provide the price transparency that's the value to the grid, and then go from there.
Great. Another theme that we heard throughout the day today, and I think that is just a national discussion, is really this whole notion of distributed energy resources. And to that extent, how much is the proliferation of distributed energy resources driving the REV agenda? And specifically, how concerned are you as a regulator in terms of impacts of an onslaught of distributed energy resources? It was brought up earlier, that there's concern that the duck curve could be a real problem in California. Germany's obviously struggling with too much solar, and so kind of where do you see that challenge fitting in within this framework, and what is your guidance to the group around that?
Okay, so first of all, one of the reasons we're doing REV is so we don't have a duck curve, or we don't have a German problem, we don't have a Hawaii problem. So part of it was to get ahead of those issues. But the other thing is that, again, I get back to Why are we want to solve things at the edge of the system? If, again, we have the right price signals going out to the system, then folks like the STEM folks you just heard about, rather than distributed energy creating a problem on the system, becomes a solution. So one of the things that we want to talk about, and what REV is really all about, is how do you manage demand at the distribution level? And the reason we identified the distribution utility as the distribution system provider is to think about that as we have higher degrees of penetration of distributed energy resources, what we fully expect to see happen is the distribution utility will start solving things at the edge of the system. So that rather than having demand have to be followed by generation and then thinking about, well, what kind of additional generation do you need? Suddenly what you have is having load really balancing generation. And that is also very frankly complementary to what we want to see at the wholesale grid. I mean, we're talking about increased penetration of wind and other types of renewables. One of the things we know is that wind energy is much more available at night than it is during peak.
Right.
So as you start thinking as demand being a solution rather than a problem, then you could start saying, well, what levels of storage or other types of resources will I want to have in my grid so I actually shift my load to the night when the wind is available, rather than thinking about everything peaking in the afternoon. So the whole point of REV is to take the smart grid construct, that this is a single integrated system, and what we're looking to do is animate both sides of that and provide value to both sides, because what we know is the system itself is a single machine.
Right.
And if we drive it like a single machine, we're going to drive efficiency for everyone, which is, again, Governor Cuomo's objective around cost and resiliency and environment all being a single thing.
It's well known to you as well as everyone in the room that REV has gotten a lot of attention in the press, and there's a lot of kind of focus on the various different elements and the proceedings. How much are you hearing from regulators in other states in terms of, are they looking at REV-like proceedings? Are they kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting to see what happens here in New York? Are you speaking with others and kind of learning lessons from other markets? How is kind of New York interacting with other jurisdictions to kind of bring the best of breed solutions here in the state?
So it's all of the above. So, some folks are watching us. People think we're crazy. Some people, want to partner with us, and we do it. So we are, as regulators, of course, we're part of a couple of associations. So I talk to a lot of my peers throughout the industry, particularly California, Minnesota, Massachusetts, are all thinking about these things. So to the extent we're thinking alike or we're seeing the same issues, we do learn from each other. Hawaii, obviously, has been far ahead on a lot of different elements. I think in terms of the regulation, though, and the comprehensive way we're looking at this, New York is leading. And I do credit the fact that we start, frankly, with a governor who really wanted to get something done, who saw problems in the industry, brought on Richard, and with Kate's help, helped assemble a team. And I don't think, frankly, anyone could move as fast as we're moving, except the fact that we have commitment from the top to get this done. And that was really a critical element, because a lot of what I see in other states is trying to convince their governors that this is important. Our governor told us this was important and really directed us to get it done.
Great. What are some of your, we've got a lot of innovators and technology folks in the room, and I think a lot of the discussion has been, a lot of excitement around REV, a lot of interest in investing in the state. But what do you see as kind of the next sort of near-term milestones that folks who are developing solutions to solve some of these energy problems, where can they look in terms of thinking about, okay, in the next 6, 12, 18 months, where should I focus my efforts that will provide most value here in the state, and that the PSC and others will look upon as really kind of moving this initiative forward at the rate in which you want?
It's a great question. So there are a number of things, but critical, one of the things that came out to us is that we did the demonstrations. I think we're very successful in the first cut, but as I mentioned, this is something that we want to continue on. So we've been working internally. I think we're going to be, in the next few weeks, we're going to flesh it out. But is to have a process that is transparent and has a go-to place where everybody can go to. And we're really for the utilities that they could start identifying their pain points and that we could start having a facilitating, really matching those needs. So that is going to be under development. I think that's going to be a very important part. I think about this as utilities developing really pipelines, very much like other innovative companies will do. How many product releases do they want to get done? What do they really want to work on? And then really facilitating that interaction. That's going to be important. We've also have our utilities are always looking at non-wire alternatives. We have our demand response program. So there's lots of different things. And then in track 2, we're working on rate design changes, which they themselves, I think, will drive innovation because we're looking for better price transparency so customers can start seeing the value of what we're looking to accomplish here. So I think watch that space. You know, it's a daunting exercise what we're doing because we're trying to be comprehensive, and I think we are. But really what this is all about now is on execution. So one of the things that I think is most innovative about REV is the fact that we're moving towards an extraordinarily collaborative process. Not only have we collaborated through the rate design, but things like this event today, through the MDPT, which I can't remember the acronym, is about. But essentially what we realize is that nobody holds all the cards here. What we're doing in New York is fundamentally different than anyone's ever done in terms of saying we really are going to start depending on demand management as a critical resource on the grid, as well as renewables and other pieces. And we need to do it right because, frankly, all eyes are on us. And you know, we see the utilities, the entrepreneurs, the third parties who are coming in, all as partners in this process, as well as the consumer advocates, because this has to work for everyone. And I think that, for me, the most exciting part going forward is going to be the demos and the continued work, but also the continued debate on how do we get this right.
Great. And I think, you know, final question, really. I mean, what would you like to leave the group with? You know, any final remarks? You know, what can we, you know, expect, you know, to talk about tomorrow? And then, you know, anything that you'd really like to impart on this community would be great.
Sure. Well, I think to pick up on my last comment, I mean, REV's success is not a question of us getting rate design right. It's really a question of figuring out what's it going to do to get people to invest, to come into the system, and then to develop the tools that the utilities feel very comfortable saying they can manage the system. Because one of the things that we take very seriously is reliability and resiliency. And so what I look at tomorrow is really an opportunity to continue the dialogue and to make sure we get in the working groups much better ideas of what should we be working on, what are the execution things that are going to matter most in the next couple of years. What I know from our team is what we would like to say is in every year, what did we accomplish this year? Not what did we talk about, but what did we get done? And I think focusing on execution is going to be such a critical piece for us over the next couple of years so that we can point to learnings and move from there.
Great.
Thank
well,
you.
With that, we'll leave it, and thank you, Audrey, and
Sure.
thanks, everyone.
Thank you.